Hi, this is group number 8, and today we're gonna present Daily Spring water case. So we're gonna basically focus on the cultural background on business negotiation. Since we didn't got the opportunity to meet each other, this is our team. So I'm Arianna.
I'm Ellen.
I'm Ragnhild.
And I'm Teresa.
Okay.
So I will start to give you the agenda for today. We will start by presenting the case, a short introduction to it. Then we will discuss the cultural dimensions, how they interact, a strategy for how to address the cultural dimension into this negotiation, our conclusions, and the references. So I will start now by giving you the introduction to the case and the parties and issues we identified. So the two parties we identified is Daily Spring, that consists of Ms. Chang, the marketing division, an engineering representative, and a director of overseas trading. We also see that the board of Daily Spring goes into here, as they are risk averse and slow decision makers, but they won't be, or they aren't participating in the negotiation. Then there's the Udona representatives, and that consists of a marketing director and Mr. Kuchi. The issues that are being negotiated is the brand, which brand the two firms will use to market the water in Japan, whether to agree on a commission for Mr. Kuchi if the market entry in Japan is successful, and the investment expenditures, as there has been issues with the packaging. Now Ragnhild will present the cultural dimensions.
So based on these issues that Ellen presented, it is important to take into account the cultural differences between Japan and China. So often in negotiation, it fails because of cultural differences, and prior research has also found that joint profit is lower in intercultural setting compared to intracultural setting. So it is important to recognize the other culture's characteristics in order to anticipate the counterpart's behavior and mindset, and also then it will be easier to adjust and reach an agreement that will benefit your interests. So in the following section, we will present what type of dimensions we perceive as important in this case. We chose long-term orientation, high power distance, and collectivism versus individualism. So we have chosen this because both represent differences and similarities in Japanese and Chinese culture. And we find those relevant in order to predict integrative behavior.
So I will start now presenting long-term orientation. This dimension looks at whether society have a future perspective, or if they value the present and past more. And we see that both China and Japan have very equal scores, on 88 for Japan and 87 for China. So this means that they're very similar and that they value making efforts and investments in the future. Values that characterize them is thrift, perseverance, ordering relationship by status, and a sense of shame. So based on this, we believe that they should leave room for relationship building. So they signal trust and reliability. They should investigate the other party's strategic objectives, and allow for a slow process. If they're doing this, they enlarge the pie and they can set common goals that benefit the both of them.
Yes, and now I'm going to talk about power distance. So the power distance dimension indicates how much a society accepts and expects an equal distribution of power. With a high score on the power distance index, the society has a high tolerance for hierarchical order and unequal power distribution, and a low score implies that society has a harder acceptance of hierarchical order and attempts to distribute power equally. So Japan has an intermediate score of 54 and China has a score of 80. So both countries have a relatively differentiated score, even though countries from East Asia are defined as high power distant cultures. The Chinese culture compared to the Japanese culture has a higher appreciation towards formal authority and confines themselves to their given rank. On the other hand, the Japanese culture has a lower tolerance for unequal distribution of power and has a higher demand for justification when it comes to inequalities. So the Japanese culture is not as hierarchical as other Asian cultures. Therefore, there do exist some differences between China and Japan in relation to power distance. Japan is more of a meritocratic society where people are awarded for what they achieve, compared to China, where social status is defined by wealth or social position. So negotiation between high and low power distant negotiators can cause tension and negative negotiation dynamics, though this mostly depends on the professional title of the negotiators. Between China and Japan, main complications consist of the acceptance of power distribution and flexibility concerning power distribution. So some of the implications which can arise are misunderstandings regarding respect for hierarchy and honoring titles. For high power distant culture in negotiation, the negotiators, they often expect low status members to agree, and therefore the low status members are not able to engage at the same level. So this can lead to misunderstanding and disagreement when negotiating, and is therefore important to be aware of.
Collectivism versus individualism dimension. It describes to which extent an individual's behavior and mindset is in relation to a collaboration or a group of people. So countries that score high on collectivism have a greater emphasis on relational harmony and match attitudes and their behavior to group norms. They also have a tendency to protect and maximize the interests of their group. One of the main characteristics of collectivism is face culture, which both Japan and China possess. In both face cultures and high collectivist countries, they place an importance in status and hierarchical social structures. It is also characterized with harmony and indirect confrontation. In addition, they have a holistic mindset when they consider the context which the problem is embedded. So in general, high collectivist culture, individuals' mindset lays in rather in we than I. So both countries score high on collectivistic culture, but the gap between the scores are worth mentioning. Japan scores higher in individualism, so we can expect that Yodono's likelihood of wanting to share the costs associated with the new packaging is lower than the China. So, however, the negotiation seller has larger and more steady effects on communication behavior than the buyer, and also women perform better in negotiation in high collectivistic cultures. So this is something that Daily Spring can leverage.
So now we are gonna proceed to suggest which tactics should Daily Spring team follow during the negotiation. So in the following slides, what you can expect is a series of recommendations based on how we expect that Yodono will react, and then based on that, we're gonna suggest to the Daily Spring team. So basically here, what we have bearing in mind is that the tactics suggested, they have just only considered one of the cultural aspects in order to do it less cumbersome. So in this case, for the issue 1, we consider that long-term orientation is the dimension that has a larger impact. And as we previously said, they both store high in long-term orientation. So what do we expect from Yodono? From Yodono, since they have a future focus, what we expect, it's more like they're gonna focus on a long-term advantage of using Japanese name and highlighting the larger likelihood of having long-term success when using its name. Based on that, what we recommend to Daily Spring is to be flexible in the short term, so they can give up with the short term name, but focus more on the long-term success of using such a well-known brand as Daily Spring. Additionally, what we suggest is that they can present more options for the future. When it comes to the second issue, we see that collectivism and individualism has a larger impact. So in this case, the score is slightly different, so we have to bear that in mind. So here, what we will find is that Yodona won't feel comfortable to commit to something that they won't be sure they will keep that word. That Yodona will emphasize more on the context of the situation, meaning that Daily Spring should not worry since they are the major superstore in Japan. Based on that, what we recommend to Daily Spring is that they actively share information and ask for interest. They highlight the trust aspect of committing to the precondition and how it could benefit to both parties since they will be more engaged to have higher sales. Additionally, we also keep on being flexible. So when it comes to the last issue, we also considered collectivism. However, since Japan is more individualistic, what we expect is that they will be more interested in their own interests. So not collaborating in the investment of the cost. And also we expect that Yodono will highlight the mutual advantage of the relationship so that this relationship in the future, like they will cover Daily Spring costs. Based on that, what we suggest to Daily Spring is that they do not focus too much on numbers, but rather on the relationship, highlighting the long process, for example, that the board takes when considering these issues, trying to negotiate by presenting a holistic solution, like instead of just one issue, so they can present multiple issues at the same time. And finally, emphasizing on the terms of their relationship, like on the rights and on the commitments.
So our overall strategy and expectation is that we will expect that Japan will adapt and have understanding of our culture, and the same way we will have it with them. So
Yeah, so for our conclusion, we have we want to pursue the integrative behavior. So in addition, we know that both cultures have a high score on collectivism, and therefore we need a strategy which actively searches and shares information. And also we want to engage in the other party's culture by a creative compromise approach, or the more engaging synergistic improvisation approach. So the extent of engagement depends on how well the parties adapt. So as Ragnhild mentioned, study tells us that intercultural negotiations have a lower joint profit compared to intercultural negotiation, and is therefore important to be aware of the differences and have a dynamic strategy in relation to how the other party adapts. Here are our references.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, here's some references. So we hope that you enjoy it, and we will look after for the questions.